Welcome back. We have understood the typecasting process. We have also seen the built-in types. We have also understood how do we understand the sequence types, right? Now, in the sequences, we will try to understand the very important thing, which is strings, which are basically strings. So, whenever you see strings, you always remember that is English alphabets, right? Yes, it's absolutely correct. So, whenever I say string, it is basically represented by a group of characters, right? Where group of characters, the characters will be obviously English alphabets, nothing more than that, or it is basically a collection of Unicode characters where you can go for single quote or double quote or triple quotes. Example. Now, to make it practical, what do we need to do? Just open your Python ideally. So, my suggestion is, while you are watching this video, it's better even if you are doing in mobile phone, watching in mobile, try to have a practice. That would be better for you, even if you are watching in desktop or laptop. So, make it simple the way you do. See, the human eye makes understand that whatever we see, it is basically visualized, right? So, once you see, you keep it remember. Once you practice, you remember it for lifetime. That's the simple funda you need to remember. Now, you see strings, you always represent that in quotations, right? So, basically you take up, whether you take up a single quote, that is a string. How do I say that is a string? When I give type of A, so when I give type of A, it gives you class as string. Either you go for a single quote or you can go for double quote. I am just writing up my name over there. The result is you can see only in single quotations, and you even do not see any quotations when you give print of A, right? It is as simple as it is. So, you can go for single quote, double quote or triple quotes. Anything is quotation, anything is representation of strings. Even you can go for double, triple quotes. That is the only flexibility you have in Python. In other programming languages, you only use double quotes, double start, double end, and the same funda here. Whatever you start up with, whether you start up with single quote, so end with single quote only. If you start with double quote, end with double quote only. That is very important, and that is mandatory. What happens if you do not follow that? You cross check yourself. Obviously, you will get one more error called as syntax error. If you remember, from the start we are seeing syntax error, name error, and in syntax errors we have seen different types. Value error we have seen. It tells you end of line while scanning string literal. That means it has searched till end of line and it did not get any result over there, because you have started single quotation and you did not end single quotation. That is where strings play a very key role when you just go with single quotes or double quotes. So, make it simple when you are trying to create a string, because it is as simple as it is you create a string with single quotes. That is the reason I told you that we do not consider multi-line comments in interpreter mode. You consider that in scripting mode, because it understands, okay, that user or programmer is writing strings. So, it assigns some memory, but when you keep that, when you do not assign that thing to a variable, it treats that entire thing as a description. That is where, suppose if you write like this, suppose if I write Codegnan, you see you get the result over there, because it has assigned some memory over there. And how do you check the memory? You can directly give ID of A, which will give you the identity of the object at that particular memory location. So, that is how we have created strings. And even there comes a very important thing where space is also considered. You get syntax error, unexpected indent. Space is also considered in Python. So, make sure that you do not give space. Suppose if you have anything like, if you want to avoid special characters like escape, if you wanted to avoid some quotations, suppose if I write don't, obviously I should write like this, right? DON apostrophe, we take apostrophe as quotation. Suppose if I write like this, see what it is telling you? It is clearly throwing you that it is an invalid syntax. So, how can you write? So, there is a one thing you can use slash, that is to escape some special characters. That is one more important property where you just make yourself like understanding, right? So, suppose I give A is equal to DO. How do I avoid that? I avoid by giving slash. Now, obviously A is don't. You can see it is representing in double quotes. That is a beauty. It's make it simple. I am just trying to write some simple things. Even if you wanted to write multiple things, right, you just give slash, it is going to next line, and you can again give something like 25. What happens? It's invalid syntax because you gave a string and what you are giving here, number. So just don't make sure that you keep up such kind of mistakes. Okay, suppose if I give plus and if I give police, what happens? I am trying to combine both the strings. We will be learning all those properties. So now you understood how to create a string, right? So you gave a string. So string is always enclosed in quotations. The next property is how do you access the elements within a string? That's where you have the concept of indexing. Basically, indexing refers how do you access the elements within a string one by one, because index is same as your, because you have index in your book. What do you use for index? You go to index and you go to specific page, right? So that's what index gives you a shortcut. And in the same way, when it comes to programming part, indexing is basically how do you access the elements one by one, and it always starts with 0 in any programming language, but it is different in R, that is a secondary thing. So basically indexing starts at 0 and ends at n minus 1. Suppose if basically we are having the number of elements within a string are 8, right, same as Codegnan, indexing starts at 0. If it is starting at 0, it will not count 8, right. So 0 to 8 minus 1 is 7, and basically the important properties of strings are, basically strings are immutable types. Once you declare a string, you cannot change the value within the string. That means it only accesses with indexing. We cannot change the values within the index, whether it is positive indexing or negative indexing. Let us go into detail when we take up with examples. So that's where when you take up indexing, let me, as we have already taken A is equal to Codegnan, I told indexing starts at 0. It starts basically at 0 and ends at n minus 1. So n is basically, n is the number of items in the sequence. That is very important. You need to always remember, n always represents the number of items in the sequence. So it starts at a of 0. So a of 0 is C and a of 5 is starting at 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a of 5 is n. So don't take it as fifth alphabet. If you go for fifth alphabet, it is G. No, it is a of 5. So why you should always go with square braces? Why can't I use parentheses? You can try, because I told you parentheses are generally used for functions and tuples. Square braces, you go for indexing by accessing only square braces, and that square braces will include the elements storing in the format of group. That's where the next type which we are going to see, lists. How do you store the values in lists, right? In the same way you give indexing, if you take up any other value outside the index, what happens? You get one more error, which is index error, that is string index out of range, because your index is having how many? If I give a of 7, I get the last alphabet. If you wanted to check the number of items in the given sequence, you can use one more function, which is length. So basically what is mean by length? The amount which occupies, right? Even if I give length of A, it tells you 8. So obviously index ends at 7. So that is positive indexing. You go from right, left to right, starting at 0 to ending at n minus 1. Now what happens if I come from right to left, ending to beginning? That way you have the concept of negative indexing. It starts at n, you go with minus 1. That is the reason even I don't use any of these curly braces, because I told you curly braces are only for set and dictionary, where we will be observing it. So always make sure that if I do in one way, you try to do in another way. That's where you understand the importance of strings, because that is the only way you try to understand not only strings, whatever we deal in Python, because Python is purely logical. The more amount of logical thinking you gain, whatever how do you trying to train your mind. So it's not that we are learning only a programming language. No, we are learning a language which can make humans communicate with machines. That's where the importance of programming paved way for learning. That's where machine learning, artificial intelligence, data science, you see all these buzzwords, right? For everything, if you want to communicate with the help of software, with the help of a programming language, there comes Python and R. R is purely statistical, and only depending on Python, people are running towards Python. So just make it simple. So you always think logical, always have question why. So if I go for negative indexing, I can access till -8, because if it is starting at ending, so -1, -2, -3, it ends at -8. And again, if you can't go to the index which is not present, index error, string index out of range, that is how you access single value, right. So if you go for length of A, that is obviously 8. And now what if I want to go for group of elements? That's where you have the concept of slicing, where the syntax looks like this. You have a starting point and you have an ending point where you separate them with colon, because colon plays a very key role, where whether you go with square braces or you try to end, whether you write a loops or conditions or functions, classes, that is the reason we use mainly colon. We do not use semicolon for ending any statement in Python programming, right. That is what you can see from beginning. I am not using semicolon anywhere. We only use semicolon when you try to make sure that you try to create variables side by side. So A of colon, you see, you get each and every element, because you did not mention any starting position, you did not mention any ending position. That is where slicing plays a very key role when you try to give within the given interval, starting and ending. And you can check yourself what happens if you give A of 1:5. Guess, when I give A of 1, people always think that, so A of 1 is O, you start at O, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you get O, D, E, G, N. If that is your answer, you are wrong. Why? I told you, right? Colon, starting, ending. It will not include after colon, because indexing starts at 0, ends at n minus 1. So what is 5 minus 1? 4. Starting at first index, ending at fourth index. So O, D, E, G. Always remember that point. So don't go it blindly. So when you give A of 1:2, you mentioned starting, you did not mention ending. So it starts at O and ends at N. And in the same way, you can check all possibilities. You gave ending, you did not give starting. So it starts at C, it will not go to fifth index. What is 5 minus 1? It will end at fourth index, C, O, D, E, G. That's what. See, you are giving the same result, A of 1:5 and O, D, E, G. And if you want to give in the same way, like, because you did not mention any starting, and suppose what happens if I give like this, you check other possibility. Why you are getting each and every item? Because you do not have any 75th index, that is 75 minus 1, 74 index. You do not get any error, because you get only error when you try to access individually. If you try to access globally, you do not get the result. And even the same thing, this is similar to A of colon, because you get each and every element, because you start at 0 and set n minus 1. So this is slicing, you go for starting and ending. What happens if I give in this way 5:1, 5 in the sense 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, n, and you expect n to O? No, it does not happen. You get empty string, because strings are immutable. Just always remember that property. Strings are immutable, so you cannot change, you cannot make any changes over there. That is the reason, if you declare a string, if you try to change any value within it, you are thrown with type error. Clearly tells you string object does not support item assignment, and that is the reason you cannot have slicing from higher value to lower value. Just keep that point simple. Slicing from higher to lower is not possible. That is a key takeaway which you can make. You just make it simple. If you try to go with this, you get empty string. Empty string also is counted, right? So that means because if you give like this, right, and if you ask length of b, it is 0 because you did not write anything within quotation. But if you keep a space within that and again you ask length of b, that will be 1 because space is also counted. This is an empty string, this is within a space. So, slicing is always from lower to higher, and in the same way, why can't I give in this way minus 7 is to minus 2? Yes, you can, because minus 7 is lower than minus 2, and even if you try to go with this, you get empty string. So, just make it simple. This is how you go for slicing. And what happens if I go for including one more column? That's where you have the concept of interval, or you have sub slicing or sub indexing, whatever you try to convert, whatever you try to take it up. Okay? But you are getting same result. Why? You are not mentioning any ending limits. So, the answer is same, and even if you go for one more input, you get the same result, because when I say 1, what does that mean? 1 minus 1, that is 0. So, indexing starts at 0 and ends at n minus 1. So, there is no sub interval, I mean there is no interval to slice over there. So, that is the reason you do not get any element missing over that. But if you take up the same example by giving 2, there you go, 2 minus 1, 1. So, one element will be skipped from starting. So, you get C, D, G, A, that is what your output. To make it very simple, let me use paint tool as of now, because we generally made it as C, O, D, E, G and A and, right. So, if I say A of, let me take it as A is equal to, okay. Now, I gave A of colon 2, just a while. So, A of colon 2, that means I am trying to access with some interval, right, that is 2. That does not mean that 2 elements will be skipped, no, 1 element will be skipped. So, starting at C, O is skipped, and then D, next E is skipped, and then G, N is skipped, and then A, so N is skipped again. So, you have C, D, G, A, that is the final result. Okay. So, just make it simple. When you go for slicing 2, one element is skipped, only with the interval you take it up. And in the same way, you can add some input within it and you can just play with it. So, first make sure you go for 1:5, and then again you can just go for slicing of 2. So, write first A of 1:5. What is A of 1:5? O, D, E, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, and again you split in that, you generally get O and E. Just make it very simple, and always remember, if you try to take it up like this, what happens? An empty string. Slicing is never ever from higher to lower, it is always from lower to higher. So, that is about how you access indexing part and slicing part, and along with that you just make sure that what happens if I go for negative part like this, -5 is to -1. So, -5 is less than -1, it is cool, and even if you go for -2 is to -2 is to, take up multiple example, -2 is to -5 is to 1, empty, because negative and positive, how do we combine it? Never, it is not possible. But can I make it in reverse way? Try with -1 over there. Yes. So, you are just coming in negative slicing, you are not changing the position, you are just having the mirror view of it. So, that is where you can clearly observe in negative, and even if you can include -2, one element will be skipped. So, N, N, E, O, just go with that, and even if you combine like this, suppose if I give 2 is to 6 is to -2, an empty, just take the multiple possibilities, you will understand the concept of the flavor of indexing and slicing. This is very important. Even when we go for multidimensional data, these play a very key role. Next, we will try to understand the methods over the strings in the next video.